The moment the announcement echoed through the airport, a strange tension filled the air, as if every traveler could sense something extraordinary about to unfold. The storm outside had forced every flight into delay, but inside the terminal, another storm was quietly forming, one that would challenge everything a man believed about success, purpose, and family. Adrian Hale, a multimillionaire CEO known for his calm control and powerful presence, walked through the bustling crowd with the confidence of someone who never had to wait for anything in life. Yet today, something felt different. A quiet pull, a strange heaviness he couldn't name. He could have escaped into the luxury lounge the moment he arrived, but an unexplainable urge made him stop near gate 14. That was when he saw them, the small cluster of 4 figures huddled together near a row of hard plastic seats. A woman with tired eyes, a worn coat, and 3 children leaning against her as if trying to stay awake. The sight made him pause, but when the eldest child lifted his face, Adrian felt his heartbeat change. The boy's eyes, deep brown with a spark he knew too well, stared back at him. Then the second child shifted, and the resemblance grew stronger. In the third, there was no denying it now. His breath caught. All 3 children looked like reflections of him. But it was the woman who made his entire world tilt. He recognized that face instantly, the calm strength, the quiet warmth he once thought he had all the time in the world to return to. His wife, the woman he had not seen in years, the woman he believed had walked away from him forever. And now she stood stranded, exhausted, vulnerable. With triplets who carried his features in every line of their faces, Adrian's fingers trembled around his suitcase handle. For the first time in his successful, unstoppable life, he felt fear, real fear. Something inside him whispered that whatever he said next could change everything. And as she finally lifted her eyes and met his, the shock between them was so powerful it felt like the entire airport fell silent. She blinked slowly, as if unsure whether the man standing in front of her was real or a memory she had tried to forget. Adrian took a hesitant step forward, but she straightened, placing a protective hand on the smallest child's shoulder. Her silence felt heavier than the storm outside, and for a moment he couldn't breathe. He wanted to speak, needed to, but no words seemed gentle enough or honest enough to bridge the distance he had created years ago. Before he could try, the loudspeaker echoed again with another delay announcement, and the triplets flinched. The smallest clung to her coat. The tallest whispered, "Mom, why can't we go home?" Her voice trembled as she soothed them, and the sound of it tore through him. That voice used to calm him during the hardest moments of his life. Now it wasn't meant for him anymore. Adrian swallowed hard. Are they mine?" he finally asked, the question slipping out in a broken whisper he couldn't restrain. She looked at him with a calmness that was sharper than anger. "They are children, Adrian, not decisions you make when it suits you." The words hit him deeper than any business loss he had ever faced, yet he couldn't look away. The children had the same determined gaze he saw every morning in his own reflection. His chest tightened with a truth he could no longer avoid. Still, there was something else. Something unspoken stirring in the air. Something that made him wonder whether this unexpected meeting was a coincidence or a chance life was forcing him to face. A chance that could disappear in the next breath. Adrian wanted to argue, to explain, to tell her that the man she remembered was not the same man standing in front of her now, but the words stayed trapped in his chest. The airport lights flickered, as if reacting to the tension between them. Passengers slowed their steps, glancing at the scene without truly knowing what they were witnessing. The triplets stared at him curiously, unaware they were looking into the eyes of someone who had once promised the world to their mother. Just then, a sudden push of wind rattled the glass wall behind them, and the children startled again. The middle child tugged on her coat. "Mom, that noise is loud." She knelt to comfort them, but her hands were trembling ever so slightly. Adrian noticed she was exhausted, not just from the delay but from life. From carrying everything alone, he took a breath and spoke gently. "Let me help, please." She didn't look at him. Help is not something you offer after years of silence. Her voice was steady, but he caught the faint tremble beneath it. That small crack in her tone pulled him deeper into the moment. Maybe, just maybe, the door wasn't completely closed. A flight attendant approached them, asking if they needed blankets or snacks for the children. She shook her head politely, but Adrian stepped forward. "Yes, they do." His tone was calm, steady, unshakable. The attendant nodded and walked off. His wife stared at him then, truly stared, as if trying to understand whether this was the same man she once knew. "Why now?" she whispered. "Why show up now, when everything already feels too heavy?" Adrian didn't have the answer yet. But destiny had placed them at the same gate, in the same storm, and something inside him told him this moment was only the beginning of a truth he had avoided for far too long. For a long moment, he didn't speak. He simply watched her gather the triplets closer, creating a small, protective circle with her arms. It stunned him. How naturally she shielded them, how fiercely she stood between them and the world. Part of him wondered if she had always looked this strong, or if life had forced her to build walls he never helped her climb. The flight attendant returned with blankets and small snack boxes. The children's faces brightened instantly, and their soft thank yous created a warmth that tugged painfully at Adrian's heart. He had missed years of moments like this, tiny smiles, small comforts, simple joys. Watching them now, he felt something inside him shift, something he couldn't ignore anymore. His wife kept her eyes on the children, not on him. "They don't know you," she said quietly, "and I don't know what you want from us." Her voice wasn't angry, just tired. Tired in a way that made him feel every one of the years he had been absent. He stepped closer but kept a respectful distance. "I don't want to take anything from you," he said softly. "But I can't walk away from them. Not now that I know." She finally looked at him, and for the first time he saw something different in her gaze. Not forgiveness, not acceptance, but a flicker of confusion, maybe even hesitation. She hadn't expected him to stay. She hadn't expected him to care. Before either of them could speak again, a nearby screen lit up with an alert, catching the attention of the crowd. Phones buzzed. People whispered while glancing toward their corner. Something was spreading, something that involved them. His wife's expression tightened. Why are people looking this way? He didn't know yet. But the growing murmurs hinted that whatever was happening would force both of them to face not just each other, but the entire world watching. Adrian felt the shift before he understood it. People weren't just glancing anymore. Phones were slowly being raised, screens glowing like small spotlights aimed directly at them. A couple near the charging station whispered, while pointing discreetly at the triplets. Another traveler lifted his camera higher, pretending to photograph the storm outside, but the lens was clearly angled toward their corner. His wife noticed it too. Her breath hitched softly. She pulled the triplets closer, wrapping the blankets around them as if protecting them from something far colder than the winter storm. "This is exactly what I feared," she murmured. Strangers watching, wondering, judging. Adrian stepped instinctively forward, placing himself between the growing attention and his family. For the first time, the word family didn't feel foreign. It felt right, heavy, alive. "I won't let anything happen," he said quietly. She didn't answer, but the way her eyes softened for half a second told him she heard him. Just then, a notification buzz rippled across the waiting area. Someone gasped. Another whispered loudly, "Is that really him? The CEO?" Within minutes, a few blurry photos had already hit social platforms, and travelers were comparing the images with the triplets' faces. The resemblance was impossible to deny. His wife's voice broke slightly. "This is getting out of control." Adrian's heart pounded, but not from fear for himself. He had lived with public attention for years. But the thought of his children being dragged into that world without protection made him feel something fierce rise inside him. He lowered his voice, steady and earnest. "Let them look at me. Not at you. Not at the kids." Then he took a step forward, positioning himself so the cameras would only catch his back while shielding them. For the first time since he arrived at the airport, his wife looked at him not with anger, but with the faintest spark of disbelief, as if she was seeing a new version of him, one she didn't expect to exist. But before that fragile moment could deepen, someone from across the terminal called out loudly, "Sir, Is this your family? Every sound in the airport paused, and suddenly there was no storm loud enough to drown what would happen next. Every eye in the terminal seemed to turn toward him at once. The question hung in the air, heavier than the storm, heavier than the years between them. Adrian felt the children shift behind him, their small hands gripping their mother's coat. His wife's breath caught, fear flickering across her face. Not fear of him, but fear of what the world might do with a story it didn't understand. He looked at her, searching her expression for guidance, permission, anything. But she didn't speak. She simply stood there, exhausted yet unbroken, waiting to see what choice he would make when the entire world demanded an answer. Adrian stepped forward, his pulse thundering. The cameras clicked. The crowd leaned in. For the first time in his life, silence felt like courage instead of weakness. "They're the most important people I've ever seen," he said quietly, not loud enough for a headline, but loud enough for her to hear. Confusion flickered through her eyes. Her lips parted slightly, almost as if she wanted to protest, but couldn't. The children peeked around her, their faces full of curiosity. Before anyone could ask more, the airport lights dimmed and flickered back to life. A new announcement echoed across the hall. "Flight 87! No boarding." The words felt surreal. Amid the chaos, her flight, was finally leaving. His wife exhaled shakily and gathered the triplets' hands. "We need to go," she whispered. Her voice carried a sadness that softened Adrian's heart, and a strength that made him respect her all over again. He nodded slowly. "Let me walk you to the gate." "Just that." She hesitated, long enough for the children to look up at her, long enough for him to fear she would refuse. But then she gave a small, tired nod. Not acceptance, not forgiveness. Just possibility. As they moved toward the gate, the crowd parted around them, murmurs trailing behind like shadows. Adrian walked beside them, close enough to protect, far enough not to intrude. Every step felt fragile, precious. A step away from the man he used to be and a step toward the father he still hoped he could become. At the gate, she paused. The triplets clutched their boarding passes, unaware of how much was unspoken around them. She looked up at Adrian, her eyes softening despite the fear. "You can't fix everything in one day," she said quietly. "I know," he whispered. "But I'm here, and I won't disappear again." For the first time, she didn't look away. And for a brief moment, just a breath, she allowed him to see the woman who once believed in him. "Maybe," she said softly, "we'll talk when the storm settles." It wasn't a promise, but it was hope. And sometimes, hope is enough to change a man's entire future.